So Lewis, how was that first day out on track for you here in Canada?
Not great, not particularly great. I love driving here. The crowd's been amazing today, but the car's a lot different to what I've experienced here in the past. And so I think P1 was all right. And then we made some changes, and I thought the car was quicker, but we just went slower. So, or they went quicker, basically. So, yeah.
We heard you mention some rear locking in FP2 there into the final chicane. Is that something you're still trying to get on top of? Hopeful that you can fix that overnight?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely overcome it overnight. Some changes to make.
Where do you think your battle will be this weekend when it all shakes out in qualifying?
I don't know, I think trying to there'll be a challenge to get into Q3 at this rate, but not impossible. And then I think trying to fight to get into the top 5. It's going to be tough.
Thank you, Lewis. Good luck.
After the practices of the Canada 2025 Grand Prix, their statements reflect not only the technical challenge of the SF25, its adaptation and the pressure of being in the shadow of Leclerc. During the free practices of the Canada Grand Prix, the SF25 became once again the protagonist of the conflict between Hamilton and his new environment. The day began with a session marked by tension, not only by the characteristics of the Gilles-Villeneuve circuit that requires surgical precision in each braking and maximum traction in curve outputs, but also by the loaded emotional environment that enveloped the heptacampion. Hamilton managed to register the 5th best time in FP1 with 1 foot 13 inches, 6:20 after 30 laps. But the time itself does not tell the real story. What really attracts attention is the way he got it. His driving was conservative, meticulous, far from that aggressiveness with which he had dominated in his golden stage with Mercedes. The lack of general grip on the track tested everyone, but Hamilton seemed more focused on surviving than to compete. In Curve 10, its SF25 was briefly out of control. A spin that, although it did not end on the wall, did serve as a symbol. A car that does not respond to its commands, a machine that seems to have your own will. While his partner Leclerc pushed from the first minute and ended against the barriers, Hamilton opted for prudence. That focus difference is no accident, but a clear sign that the British has not yet found that melting point between pilot and machine. The posterior telemetry was devastating. A significant loss of trust was evidenced, especially in intense braking areas, where Hamilton is historically strong. The problem seems to be multifactorial, a combination between a Brembo brake system inconsistent to that Hamilton defined as a lottery, and a lack of sensitivity with the rear train from the car. This erratic behavior forces him to modify his natural driving style, which generates a domino effect in all his performance. It can no longer stop with the same aggressiveness or trust the point of turn when entering the curve. Each meter in the circuit is a bet. In the second session, FP2, Hamilton achieved a relative improvement. It ended 8th with a time of 1 foot 12 inches, 6:53, reducing its gap to half a second with respect to George Russell, the fastest of the batch. However, this improvement must be seen in context. The difference with the tip remains significant. The most worrying thing is not the position but the persistent feeling that, even with adjustments and improvements, even with adjustments, pilot does not feel owner of the car. What happens with Hamilton in these free sessions is not a simple technical adaptation process. It is an emotional struggle against frustration of knowing that it still cannot extract the potential of the car. It is the reflection of a champion who is not afraid to change his approach, but who is forced to deconstruct his style that gave him 7 titles to survive and compete in a completely different environment. Each curve, each line, every attempted fast return is not only a performance test, is a silent battle between the usual instinct and the new reality imposed by Ferrari. When the practices day in Canada ended, what caused the most impact was not a quick lap or sudden improvement in the timetable. It was a phrase. Lewis Hamilton, with a serious face and a look full of helplessness, launched a statement that froze the paddock. It is one of the most frustrating days of the year. I feel that I am fighting more against the car than against my rivals. That confession, loaded raw, summarizes the internal dilemma that a pilot crosses that, for more than a decade, had been the face of technical excellence in Formula One. These words should not be analyzed as a simple passing complaint. They represent an emotional crack, the evidence of a much more arduous adaptation process than expected. What Hamilton expressed publicly is what has been showing on track. A disconnection with the SF25 that goes beyond technical learning. It is an identity struggle. The pilot who used to challenge the return limits after return is now forced to calculate each movement with caution, reconfiguring his intuition to survive a car that punishes any daring. Hamilton recognized, perhaps for the first time so explicitly, that he underestimated the challenge. He thought that his experience and talent would be enough to tame the Ferrari, a temperamental and complex car. But reality has taught him a lesson that many champions have had to face when changing equipment. The past does not guarantee you anything. Neither the titles, nor the records, nor the historical exploits serve when the car under you feel like a stranger. And it is that in modern F1 the car is no longer just a tool, it is an extension of the pilot. If there is no synchrony, the performance collapses regardless of how legendary you are. One of the most revealing aspects of his statements is the recognition that he has had to change his driving style completely. Hamilton, famous for his ability to stop late, keep the car stable at curve entrance and then apply power progressively, has been forced to adopt a much more similar approach to that of his partner Charles Leclerc. This means releasing the accelerator before, stop more anticipated and allow the car to roll more in the vertex of the curve. An approach that goes against their natural reflexes, trained for years in the sophisticated Mercedes cars. The psychological impact of this change is immense. Not only does it affect your technical performance but your general trust. In simpler words, Hamilton no longer knows if he can trust his instincts. Each lap becomes a constant doubt, where each micro-decision must be renowned, measured, calculated. And when a pilot of his caliber begins to question his intuition, a deep wound is opened that is not simply heals with more practicing laps. That statement was not just a lament. It was also a warning to the world. A sign that the champion is at the limit, perhaps facing the most complicated challenge of his entire career, reinventing himself from scratch in an environment that does not forgive mistakes. And yet, behind those hard words, there is a nuance of hope. Because recognizing the problem with that brutal honesty is the first step to solve it. If someone can do it, it's him. But time runs and Formula One does not expect anyone. Hamilton's current scenario in Ferrari, clearly embodied during the Canada Grand Prix, is not a simple bad performance streak. Hamilton is not just an experienced pilot, it is a constant reinvention symbol. Throughout his career he has faced technical adversities, political pressures within personal teams and challenges that could have ended his legacy much earlier. But he always found a way to adapt, to evolve his style, to overcome even the most adverse contexts. However, what faces now is different. He is fighting a car that not only requires technical adjustments, but an almost total transformation of his driving philosophy. It is no longer about finding a few tenths by return, it is about rebuilding his identity as a pilot on a machine that seems to have other codes. Ferrari, meanwhile, is not the most fertile terrain for a patient adaptation process. It is a team that operates under permanent pressure, with an extremely vocal global fans base, a press that does not forgive mistakes and an internal culture that has historically had difficulty supporting its pilots when things are not going well. In that environment, Hamilton meets little margin of error. The fact that Charles Leclerc has known how to get better into the same car even with his own ups and downs intensifies the trial over the British, reducing the tolerance time he has to find his best version. The immediate future is at stake. The next races, especially those where Hamilton has historically shown, could mark a before and after. If in those paths it also does not highlight, Ferrari's internal narrative could change the adaptation process to failed investment. Because let's not fool ourselves, Hamilton's signing was not a technical bet, it was a symbolic statement, a Ferrari media play to claim his place at the top. And if that symbol does not yield, the project's speech cracks. But there is also an alternative reading. If Hamilton manages to break this emotional and technical barrier, if he manages to tame SF25 in the next careers and translate that improvement into tangible results, we could be facing one of the most shocking redemption stories in the history of the category. Because when a pilot like Hamilton manages to overcome a crisis of this level, he not only recovers his form, redefine your legacy. In short, what is at stake is not just one more season. It is the possibility of rewriting his last great act as a pilot of Formula One. Of closing his career at the top, demonstrating that greatness does not reside solely in statistics or titles, but in the ability to get up when everything seems lost. And that, precisely that, is what still keeps the hope of millions of fans worldwide. What we saw in Canada is not just an isolated episode within the 2025 season, it is the reflection of a construction story that can lead to one of the greatest narrative turns in Lewis Hamilton's career. In this moment of maximum tension, where statistics are no longer comfort and forecasts are diluted before the unpredictability of the SF25, what remains is a question that demands an answer. Are we facing the slow blackout of a legend or before the prelude to a comeback that will challenge the expectations of the entire world? Formula One has always been more than technique and speed. It is a sport built on human emotions, about personal struggles and collective challenges. What Hamilton is living with Ferrari encapsulates that better than ever. The confrontation between the past and present, between what was and what can still be. This story is still in development, and every grand prize that comes could add a key piece to define its outcome. And now we want to know what you think. What do you think need to reverse this situation? More time, an internal change in Ferrari, or something deeper in your approach? Leave your opinion in the comments. Active the bell so as not to miss anything.